This story goes back about 15 years, when I was working in the Philippines. To give you some background, the job I was doing at the time was tour guiding. And I'd been doing that work over there for about 15 years. There was something that happened during that period that anyone who heard it would find deeply unsettling. At the time, the travel company had its own reasons for keeping things quiet, so we just let it slide. I've been listening to this radio program for a couple of years now. I know I'm a bit late to the party, but somehow the timing finally lined up and I get to tell this story today. It's summer, and just hearing the word Philippines makes the whole image of that tourist destination come flooding back. The place I was based was one of the most popular destinations in the Philippines, especially in summer. I'm sure most of you know it. Cebu. Back when I was team leader, the years 2007, 2008, 2009, those were insanely busy times. I mean, guides were literally on duty every single minute of every day. At that point, Cebu in the Philippines was far more popular than Thailand or anywhere else in the region, and every travel agency in Japan was funneling their customers straight to Cebu. I was working as the team leader at a local ground operations company in the Philippines, what we call a land operator, receiving guests from Japanese travel agencies and running their tours. Because of the nature of that work, we had a lot of guides. Keeping up with all the guide assignments, hearing their reports, managing issues, it was a full-time job in itself. The story I'm going to tell you didn't happen to one of my own guests. It happened to one of my junior guides. But it became such a massive issue internally that one entire wing of the resort involved was eventually shut down and demolished. Let me get into it. First, you should know that I can't name the resort. We'll call it S Resort. And the people in this story are three female guides. Let's call them Guide A, Guide B, and Guide C. A is the most senior, B is mid-level, and C is the newest junior guide. Now, as I mentioned, 2007 through 2009 were brutal years. By the time I heard this story, in 2010, guides were completely worn down. There were so many guests coming in, and with that came a constant stream of complaints. Room quality complaints, food complaints, all of it. Here's something important to understand: the resorts our land operation managed ranged from 5-star to 4-star and lower. The resort in this story was on the lower end of that range. That meant more complaints from Japanese guests than at the nicer properties. Japanese guests would arrive expecting the crisp, dry bedding and clean water they were used to back home, and instead they'd walk into a humid Southeast Asian room, hot and damp, with clammy mattresses and the air thick with moisture. Complaints started the moment they checked in. Our guides knew exactly what they were dealing with. Because of this, we held weekly team meetings, a chance for everyone to share what had gone wrong and try to sort through the issues together. On one particular meeting day, I noticed that Guide C, the youngest of our female guides, looked off. Her expression was dark. I figured she was just exhausted from the season. It passed. Then the busy season wound down. At some point after things slowed up, Guides A, B, and C, the three women, got together one evening over some beer, the way people do after a grueling stretch of work. They were venting about the hard moments, sharing war stories. That's when C spoke up. "Something happened to me," she said. "Senior, can I tell you about it?" So they listened. Here's what C described. The setup: Cebu flights from Japan typically arrive late at night. That means guides go to the airport for pickup meetings around midnight or 1 in the morning, escort the guests to the resort, and handle check-in at 1 or 2 a.m. The next morning, the guide returns for a briefing meeting to kick off the tour itinerary. On this particular night, C's group included an elderly couple. Their son and daughter-in-law had paid for the trip and sent them off as a gift. The couple was part of C's package group. After getting them checked into their room, C was in a rush. When you're managing guests across more than one resort in the same night, which was common, you have to check in the first group, make sure everyone's settled, then immediately head to the second resort. Normally, guides would stay outside for about 10 minutes after check-in to catch any immediate problems. If anything's wrong, come out to the lobby or call the front desk and I'll take care of it. But that night was too hectic. C got the couple into their room, waited maybe 3 minutes, and then headed straight to the next resort. This was before smartphones and messaging apps were widespread. The elderly couple had no way to quickly reach their guide even if they wanted to. The next morning, when C arrived for the morning briefing about 20 to 30 minutes before the scheduled meeting time, which is standard, she found the elderly couple already in the lobby, waiting for her. They had been looking for her. "Guide! Where is our guide?" calling out for C in the lobby. When C approached them and asked what was wrong, the old man came at her with frustration. "Why weren't you here?" C explained that she doesn't stay at the resort, she has her own home, she goes back after her shift, and meetings are at scheduled times. His response: "What kind of guide doesn't look after her guests?" Then he got into it. "First thing, change our room," he said. Bluntly. No formality. C asked what the problem was. No available rooms, as it turned out, the resort was packed. But she let him explain first. He said, "Last night, after we checked in and I started unpacking, the phone in the room suddenly rang. I thought maybe it was the guide calling, or the front desk calling about something. I picked it up. Silence. Nothing on the line. I figured it was a wrong connection, hung up, and sat down on the bed. Then came a knock at the door. Not a normal knock, not tap tap. This was tap 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 tap. 7 knocks, rapid and hard. He thought it might be the guide, or someone from the resort. He told his wife, "You go check." She went to the door. From the bed to the door is maybe 4 or 5 seconds, that's all. She opened the door. Nobody there. They checked left and right down the corridor. The resort had a layout like a typical apartment-style building, a long corridor with rooms on both sides, so you could see clear to the end in either direction. Nobody. They closed the door. Must have been a prank, they figured. Or a stone bouncing off the door, maybe. They went back to unpacking. Then the phone rang again. The old man worried, what if it's a real call from someone at the resort? He didn't speak English. What would he even say? He picked up, hoping it might be the guide. Silence again. He hung up. They sat back down. And then loud, urgent knocking again. Frantic this time. Bam 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 bam. This time, the old man thought, if someone's knocking and running, I'll catch them. He positioned himself right at the door, hand on the doorknob. He told his wife, when the phone rings, answer it. He was ready to throw the door open the instant the knocking started. Right on cue, the phone rang. His wife answered. Silence on the line. Then, knock knock knock. He yanked the door open. Nobody. Both directions down the corridor, completely empty. The old man had had enough. Get out of here, he shouted into the empty hallway. We're on vacation. We're not your toys. Stop messing with us. He slammed the door. They got into bed. After that, no more calls, no more knocking. But they lay there on edge, waiting, unable to sleep. As soon as the sun came up, they went straight to the lobby and started looking for their guide. C went to the front desk and explained that her guests were complaining about their room and wanted a change. The front desk staff member replied with a calm and completely unsurprised, yes? C said, our guests say there was something strange in their room. Yes? Not alarmed. Not curious. Completely unbothered. C said, they'd like a different room. Yes? Meaning it was fine. There wasn't a room of the same tier available, so the couple ended up getting upgraded to a better room. That helped. They settled in and ended up having a good trip with no further incidents. But C couldn't shake what she'd heard. She started going back and forth in her own mind. Was this real, or was it a complaint someone was exaggerating to score a room upgrade? That kind of thing did happen occasionally. But these were a sweet older couple, they weren't the type to pull something like that. She was so bothered by it that she finally brought it up with the company director. His response was simple, you don't have to run that resort anymore. And he pulled her from the assignment. So C hadn't been working that resort. And then the 3 guides got together for that evening of drinks, and C told her story. Guide A, the most senior, went quiet for a moment when C finished. "What was the room number?" A asked. 203, said C. "My guests had the exact same thing." A told her story. Her guests had been a young couple. Same scenario, late night arrival, check-in, waited outside for about 10 minutes, nothing happened, she left. The next morning, the couple came running out of the resort. The guy was in bare feet. His girlfriend was still wearing slippers. They were sprinting out of the building. "Change our room," he said, barely stopping. A asked what had happened. "Same thing. Phone rings the second they walk in. They pick up, silence. Then the knocking starts. Relentless knocking. The young guy even tried saying hello? Hello, in English, thinking it might be a resort staff member. Nothing. He'd had enough after a few minutes. He grabbed his girlfriend and they ran. And the room number? 203. Then it happened again with another set of guests. Same room. The pattern was 203, then 303, then 503, same building, rooms stacked vertically. Guide A said she'd stopped working that resort after her incident. At that point, Guide B, who had been sitting quietly between the two of them, suddenly looked like she'd seen a ghost. She was rubbing her arms as if trying to get rid of goosebumps. "Are you okay?" they asked her. B had her own story. And it happened in the same resort. Same building. B's incident was different and honestly the most unsettling of all. Same setup, late night group check-in, same resort. After getting everyone into their rooms, B waited outside for about 15 minutes. Nobody came out, so she assumed everything was fine and left. The next morning, one of her groups had a mother and daughter traveling together. When the daughter came out for the morning meeting, her eyes were completely red. Not a little pink, I mean as red as someone with a severe eye infection, with the redness spreading to the skin around the eyes. B asked if she was okay. Did she need to see a doctor? She had contacts and could arrange it right away. The daughter said no. Then the mother pulled B aside. "Come over here, I can't say this in front of everyone." It turned out this mother and daughter were both spiritual mediums, what in Japanese culture would be called itako or spiritual channelers. When they checked into the room, the mother felt it immediately. Something was wrong with the energy in that room. She knew before she even unpacked. Sure enough, the phone rang. The mother picked it up instantly and said, sharp and direct, "Hey. Stop calling." Then came the knocking, tap-tap at the door. The mother threw the door open and spoke into the empty hallway with full authority, "I see you. Don't play games in here." She closed the door. After that, no more calls, no more knocking. But the daughter, who had her own spiritual sensitivity, lay down in bed and stared at the ceiling while her mother took care of things. That's when she saw it. A dark shape forming above her on the ceiling. Slowly taking form. And then, two red eyes. Glowing. Staring down at her directly. In her tradition, if you're a spiritual medium and something like this confronts you, you cannot look away. If you lose the stare down, the entity can enter your body and cause you serious harm, physical illness, spiritual damage. So she locked eyes with it. And she held that stare. For the entire night. She didn't sleep for a single minute. She barely even blinked. That's why her eyes looked the way they did the next morning. The mother had more to say. She turned to B and said firmly, "That room should not have guests in it. Don't put anyone in there again." B nearly broke into tears telling A and C this story. All three of them were shaken. Same resort. Same building. Same type of incident, over and over. They brought it to their company director. The director decided to take formal action. He sent an official written notice to the resort, a document stating that their land operation would no longer be using that building for any guests. And here's the part that said everything: the resort already knew. It wasn't just their company. Multiple land operators in Cebu had been receiving the same complaints about the same building. The resort was aware of what was happening. They just hadn't done anything about it. After enough pressure from enough operators, the building was officially closed. No more guests. When I went back to that resort about 7 or 8 months later, the building had been formally shut down. And roughly 2 years after that? When I drove past, the building was gone. Completely demolished. They tore it down. Now, if you've been to Cebu or you're planning to go, the resort in question is on the quieter, more inland side of the area. It's not one of the properties being actively promoted these days. So you don't need to worry about it. But here's some history that explains why that particular spot had problems. A long time ago, the resort had been built and originally operated as a Japanese-owned property. That goes back to the period after World War II, when Japanese nationals were among the first to develop tourist infrastructure across Southeast Asia, before Chinese investors, before Taiwanese investors. The land itself, according to local residents, had been the site of significant atrocities during the Japanese wartime occupation of the Philippines. The Philippines suffered enormously under that occupation. People don't always talk about it, but Filipinos endured tremendous loss and trauma at the hands of occupying forces, comparable to, and in some ways exceeding, what happened in other occupied territories. When I was guiding, I'd share this history with guests and it was genuinely heartbreaking every time. The location reportedly had a dark history going back to those years. Mass casualties. A lot of suffering on that land. It was also oceanfront, a beautiful view. Cheap, post-war. Someone bought it for very little and put up a resort. For years it ran, got older, and as Cebu developed and better properties came online, this one fell further and further behind. It became the lower-tier option. The resort owners knew what their property was built on. And they knew what guests were experiencing in that building. They just kept quiet about it, the same way our company stayed quiet, the way all the land operators stayed quiet, because if word got out to the Japanese travel agencies, it would cause problems for the whole supply chain. Everyone whispered around it. Until the night the three guides sat down together over a couple of beers and the whole thing came out. That's what finally forced the formal notice. That's what led to the building closure. And eventually, the demolition. Is it still demolished? As far as I know, yes. I stopped running that property a long time ago. But I drove by a couple of years after everything happened, and where that building used to stand, there was nothing left. And honestly, for those guests who experienced it, the elderly couple who couldn't sleep, the young couple who ran out in bare feet, the young woman who stared down something in the dark all night just to protect herself, what was supposed to be a fun vacation turned into something they probably never fully shook off. That's the end of my story. Please hit subscribe and turn on notifications if you'd like more stories like this. Thank you.